They have a few folks come in. I don't know. I am not in charge of any of that. And what I'm most excited about is I don't have to do much speaking. So I'm going to introduce and get out of the way to let Michael speak and let his wife critique him, just like she critiqued me at my sermon earlier. I give her a hard time because we are honored to have her on the faculty. We stole her away from another school, and she is at Sixes now. And we're blessed, but most importantly, her students are blessed, which is what the students would say about Mr. Michael Kobito, who is the Georgia Teacher of the Year, which means he got absolutely no pay raise whatsoever. But he does get to go to events like this. In fact, I told him, he was looking at his recent travels. He was out at the headquarters of Google a couple of weeks ago. And now he is at Lafayette, Georgia. And he says he really can't tell the difference. So I was appreciative of that lie. He is a music educator that was for Woodland High School in Cartersville, Georgia. He is alma mater at some school in Athens where he was the director of the drum major of the marching band there, something Redcoats, I can't keep up with it, marching band. Since then, he has received, and of course he gives this to me in small font, he has been the recipient of 5 National Band Association citations for excellence, has been named AP Teacher with Distinction after his AP Music Theory class at 100% participation and 100% pass rate. He was named the Bartow County and the Woodland High School Teacher of the Year before doing this. He teaches AP Music Theory. He leads a band program that consists of multiple concert bands, marching bands, jazz bands, basketball pep band, pit orchestra, chamber ensembles, and private lessons institute. During its tenure, the band has performed at the Cherry Blossom Festival in D.C., the Georgia Music Education Association Conference, the Southeastern State Honors Band Festival, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York, and recently was in London for their New Year's Day Parade where the band performed. He is a renowned educator. He is a renowned musician. I found out he has 2 groups he currently performs with, a brass group and another concert group that performs. We may get him back here, David, as we get ready to open back some of our music programming. But most importantly, I got the chance to hear Michael when he came to our school and spoke to our faculty. For the first time, nobody was interested in leaving a faculty meeting early. Normally, they're packing things up, but they even had questions for him, and no teacher is usually dumb enough to ask questions at the end of a faculty meeting. So we're honored to have him here. I know there are a number of you here who are guests, including my semi-boss, Wilson here, who is the general presbyter for the presbytery, and a number of other folks. After this is over, we do have a reception with lots of chocolate chip cookies, so please come down and eat them. We are taking none of them home, and I've already had Miss Kobito said we're not giving them to her 3rd graders tomorrow either. So we've got to finish those off before we leave here today. Finally, one other piece of housekeeping that is not going to bother Michael at all. I've made sure of it. If you need to use the facilities, the 2 best ways to do that is, one, if you go through the doors right there, we're not going to make you sing just because you went through the choir loft. There's a restroom right there. There's also restrooms up the stairs, again, through the choir loft. But David's not going to recruit you. I made him promise since this was a special event. Next time, I'll let you. But would you join me in welcoming Mr. Michael Kobito, the 2023 State Teacher of the Year.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you. And thank you for being here. Really excited to get a chance to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I've discovered as I've gone around the state and done some speaking and learning and listening to educators and students alike about what is going on in education. I feel like when we talk about these particular things, whether I'm talking to superintendents or students or the people in the middle or just regular community members like us in this room, there are a couple of things that remain resonant. One of them is that people like to hear stories sometimes. So I'm going to start off with a cute picture. This is Michael Kobito. Isn't he adorable? This is me on my first day of school. way back in the day at Hardwick Primary School just outside of London. My educational journey actually began in the United Kingdom, and it started with me just going to school and loving the idea that every day I got to get better at something. Isn't that what school's about? I was so excited to get to learn. And I knew that in my life, my job was going to be able to give that opportunity to other kids in the future. Forever, I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that's what I was going to do. And my life journey kind of took me through this path where I had some teachers that changed the world for me. They changed my life. They gave me tools to become successful. I had great middle school band directors and high school band directors, so I became a band director. I went to UGA, Go Dogs, where I was drum major of the Red Coat Band, and I knew that I was going to be a really great teacher. At least I thought I was. I was really confident about that. My dream job when I was in high school was to be the assistant high school band director at Woodland High School in Cartersville, Georgia. Because my band director was so good, I wanted nothing more than to get to learn more from him. The job opens up after my first year teaching. I apply for the job. I get an interview. I get a second round interview, and I show up, and I'm so thankful that I had the chance to talk and make sure that the principal there knew he was getting the best teacher in the state for that job. Me. I was so sure that I was the best guy for the spot. I was saying, "You're welcome," for getting the chance to talk to me. I was so confident about it. And the interview was almost over. And Dr. Dickey, my principal, asked me one final question. He said, "Michael, you're amazing. I love you. You're great. Final question of the day. Of the 3 R's of education, which one is the most important and why?" And for the first time, I was completely stumped. It's like going through my Rolodex of information. What are the 3 R's of education? Which one is the most important? And it got me thinking, is it reading, writing, and arithmetic? And I very quickly learned that those are not the 3 R's of education. I very quickly learned that it was something completely different. So what we're going to talk about today is kind of some of my musings on education in terms of philosophy, in terms of practice, and in terms of trends based on what the actual 3 R's are. So we'll start with the first one. Rigor. And I think it's important that when we talk about things like rigor, we look at the definition. This is what Webster says. Webster calls it the quality of being thorough, exhaustive, and accurate. Now, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about some of these words and what these words mean. When we talk about exhaustive, we don't talk about exhaustive being tiring or you need an inhaler at the end of something. Exhaustive just means comprehensive, all-encompassing, well-rounded. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But I do want to talk about some more misconceptions with the word rigorous. When you were in school, did anyone have a teacher that gave you more homework than you thought you needed? Anybody feel that way? I felt that way all the time. I had a teacher that used to brag about the rigor of their course because they made us read 100 pages a night. As a high school kid, I did not read 100 pages a night. I was I can make things up really well, so I was fine. But sometimes we confuse the words rigor and strain. Rigorous versus strenuous. Education right now is taking a turn away from things being rigorous for the sake of being difficult, and instead rigorous for the sake of being productive, progress-based, emphasizing learning. Here's another misconception that I find. Teaching versus training. You're going to see and notice in education right now that there's a big push towards making sure that kids are taught to learn, not trained to do. Think about all the things that you did in class, and I can probably read your mind when you think about the way that your grandkids or your kids are doing math right now. Why are they doing math like that? What was wrong with math when I was a kid? They're doing all these I just memorized all my times tables. But we're learning now as we do all the research and we're looking at the data, we're learning that teaching is the objective, not training kids to do. Why? Because we were talking about it a few minutes ago. My phone is a calculator, and I've got it with me all the time. I don't need to be trained to do. I need to be taught to learn. And that's a big thing about education that we're really focusing on right now, too. I want to go back to this word, though, and I'm about to get on a soapbox, another soapbox. So you have to bear with me. Look at the words that are in red. Thorough and exhaustive. I'm going to give you just about 3 minutes of my philosophy about things that are missing in education that we really need to prioritize to make sure education is thorough and exhaustive. And that is the arts. Did anyone participate in arts classes as a student? Anybody? I know we have some choir people in the house. Some of you did. And some of you probably think the arts are cool. How many of you appreciate the arts? Yeah, and not a single person keeps their hand down because the arts are something. Imagine this room with no color and the stained glass. Imagine church without music. Imagine driving home with no color, no music, no sound, no poetry, no art. Arts are really an essential part of what we do. If we want our students to have a rigorous opportunity, this is something that I find really important. If you don't believe me, this is what most educational experts say are the purposes of education. It needs to be beneficial economically. It needs to be culturally representative. It needs to be socially promoting. And it needs to be personally beneficial. These are the four elements of education as a full encompassing entity that people talk about a lot, and there's nowhere else that you find that more prominently than the arts. So let's talk about the economics real quick. This is something you probably didn't know, but you're about to learn that today. You're welcome. Georgia Arts Contribution. Did you know that the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis says that arts and culture is a $730, no, that's not a typo, $billion industry? When you think about the economics of our world and of our nation, the arts are a really big part of that. Now, if you talk about school, and we're talking about the rigor part, right? Making sure it's thorough and exhaustive and accurate. If you take arts away from schools, the need for arts doesn't go away. So what do? We find it somewhere else. That's not something we want to do. It's really, really big. Now, think about the state of Georgia. You know, Tyler Perry's built that huge studio in Atlanta. The music scene has always been happening in the state of Georgia. There are famous artists from all across the state. In the state of Georgia, it's a $37 billion annual revenue stream for just the state of Georgia in the arts. So, and it also provides 200,000 plus jobs across our state. So I think the arts in our state is really important economically. Let's talk about kids. Anyone have kids or grandkids or great-grandkids in the house? Okay, when the baby's fussy, do you just randomly shake it? I hope not. If that's the way that you do things, I'm going to advise you not to do that. But you usually would rock the baby to a steady tempo, to a steady beat. From the beginning of our lives, we love music. From the beginning of our lives, we love art. So I think that's a really important part of this. And then we start to grow, and we get bigger, and we start to need to find ways to be social. I show this picture because I look a lot younger and happier in this picture. Look how cute I am here. But also because in this picture, I've got a lot of things that I think socially are really important to share with you as you go into your communities and you try to promote what we're talking about today. This student right here, been playing piano since she was 3 years old. She'll be going to college next year for free because she's a musician. This kid right here, she is the valedictorian at Woodland High School. She'll be going to the Ivy League of her choice because her grade point average is so high. This kid right here, he plays the oboe. He's the center on the football team. He'll be going to a Division I school as a college athlete. This kid right here is at SCAD on a full ride as an artist, visual artist. And the thing that's unique about the arts is what other classroom do you see that kind of conglomeration of people come together socially and working together? The smiles on their face are genuine. I made a joke right before this picture was taken and they captured it. It wasn't a posed thing. These kids are genuinely happy socially working together. So that's through grade school and high school. And if you think about kids right now, what's the biggest thing that people are talking about with education right now with teenagers? Mental health. Have you heard about that? I hope you've heard about that. And that's something that the arts are doing a great job of controlling and helping. Here's a quote that I find very interesting. Back to the arts. College. The idea was that people who have other interests tend to be able to communicate, they're more social, they ask for help, they're more readily available when they need help, and they tend to help others more who need help, and they tend to think more horizontally. This quote is not from the AJC, it's not from the New York Times, it's not from Michael Kobito, your neighborhood-friendly band director. This is from the president at Georgia Tech, who says that the people he admits the most are people that play an instrument or an art. On the front page, look this up when we're done here. Go to Google Georgia Tech admissions. The front page of their pamphlet, they have the data for how many kids in that freshman class are in arts programs. Thorough, exhaustive, rigorous. Let's talk about med school. We got a couple doctors in the house. The Princeton Review talks about medical school, and they do a lot of things. And here are the 5 things that they studied about undergraduates trying to go to medical school. He said that there were 5 different degree programs that were really popular for med school: biological sciences, social sciences, physical sciences, other, and humanities and the arts. A study was done that showed that the highest percentage of acceptance rate to college for medical school was not physical science, not biology, not chemistry, but humanities and the arts. Pretty impressive, right? You probably would have never guessed that. Now, here are the hurdles to making sure that kids have that fully inclusive arts education or education in general. Finance. I'd be curious to know how much money your school systems give to your arts programs here in the county or in this city. How much money you're able to provide for those particular students, and how much support is there. I'll tell you right now at my school, and this is just me on my soapbox, I'm about to step off of it, don't worry. My band program went to London 2 months ago. Big trip. $500,000 trip for our students. Our school system didn't provide hardly enough money for that particular opportunity because we had to fundraise all of that. How much are we supporting our kids? How much are we supporting those programs to make sure that our students get a fully inclusive experience? So let's talk about just the entire conglomeration of the first R, rigor. What was happening yesterday, what's happening now, and what needs to happen tomorrow? Based on what we talked about for the last 7 or 8 minutes, I would say yesterday we had a lot of focus on doing. What can we do? Today, we're transitioning for tomorrow, which is what do we know? What can we learn? I think we're seeing a lot of the time that industry right now is not focused so much on routines and being able to do the same repetitive motion, but more on how critically can we think? How fast can we adjust? How fast is innovation going? And that's going to be the next thing that we talked about. Second R, relevance. Take a look at this definition. Relevance is the quality or state of being closely connected or appropriate. So this is the part where you get to have some fun. I want you to take a look at this. And I want to preface this by saying, this quote came straight out of a dissertation that I read, because I'm a nerd. I read like dissertations. I go on JSTOR or Galileo, and I read like academic studies because I'm really cool. But this came from a study that I read from a principal, and it says this: students today depend on blank too much. They don't know how to write blank. Now, with the people around you, I want you to go ahead and have a conversation. How would you fill in those blanks? What do you think? You can talk to each other. It's okay. I know you're in church, but still. What do you think?
I think they depend too much on information. They don't know how to write creatively or expressively.
Ooh, so they depend too much on other people's thoughts.
Yeah,
they don't know how to
cite a source
oh.
rather than
come up with something.
yeah, or opine,
Oh.
or say this is what I think about it.
Interesting. I think that's good. That's good. I like that. What do you think? They don't know how to write what? The list is long, isn't it? No, it's okay. That's okay. On their phones and tablets too much. Yep. What do you think? Say again? The internet too much. They don't know how to write what? Ooh, in cursive. That's very specific. I love it. I love it. IDK. Anybody want to share with the class? Anybody have an idea that you're bold enough, willing to share what you think this might say? So you're saying they depend too much on the keyboard. They don't know how to write in cursive or in print. Anybody agree with that? Oh, whoa, okay. And the hands all at once. That's awesome. Who's got another one you want to share with the class? What you got?
Well, I guess the first one is their iPhone or technology, but the last part is standard English, formal English. You've got the text
IDK?
L-A-T-R.
Yes. So spelling or grammar is gone because they focus on their thumbs instead of, their brains. Okay, what else? Ooh, so they don't know how to get from here to here. That's kind of what you were saying. Okay, so you're saying students today depend on Google too much. They don't know how to write what? For themselves, maybe? They don't know how to write for themselves? Okay, now you probably see this coming. This is all a trap that I've done to you. This is from a literal published paper, and the actual responses from this is, students today depend on paper too much. They don't know how to write on a slate without getting dust all over themselves. They can't clean a slate properly. What will they do? Yes. And they said they can't clean a slate properly. What will they do when they run out of paper? Now, granted, this article was from 1815. Right, and to be honest, I had to look up what a slate was as well. It's for chalk. Okay, so, but here's the thing. This was a real concern that people had because how on earth are we going to be able to adapt to what comes next? So let's continue this conversation really, really quickly. Anybody know what that is? Hieroglyphics, okay? Anybody take notes on that when you were in school? No, okay, cool. What's that? That's pen and ink, or you can say papyrus and quill if you're fancy. Cool. And what is that? It's a rotary phone. I have never used one in my life, but I have seen them on TV. And what is that? Another thing that I have not personally used, but I have seen those in person, and that is a typewriter. Now, here's the thing that I want. This is the point. This is the thing that we need to get at together. Top left, 10,000 years ago, approximately, is when we found this. 1,000 years ago, about 100 years ago, about 50 years ago. The evolution of this has happened so quickly, and it's only getting faster. Here's another example. Anybody have a MySpace in your day? Or your kids had MySpace? Some of you had a MySpace. I had a MySpace. This was maybe 15, 20 years ago. I'm aging myself. Hello, and that's okay. Anybody have a Facebook? Did you know that kids today think if you're on Facebook, you are old? Because they rather use Instagram. Anybody have Instagram? Okay, a couple of you. But kids today don't even use Instagram because they're so busy on TikTok. Now, here's the thing, and this is the part that's tough. A lot of the time when we talk about relevance in education, we think so much about our own experience, and we forget to think about the experience that our kids need. Think about that for a second. We spent a lot of time laughing together and thinking about this, but that principal in 1815 was legitimately nervous about paper. Genuinely. And now we think about how can we put that into our own context? How much does a kid need to write in cursive versus type? How much does a kid need to be able to do this instead of this? So when we're thinking about education and the future of education and the trends, I think it's important for us to remember where we came from, think about where we are today, but most importantly think, what do they need tomorrow? And that's where the investment has to be. Here's another thing that you might find fun. Are you able to see this okay? Can you see this okay? So this is another fun game, and you're not going to like this at all. This is the four different generations we've got on the screen, and I just took this from a small sample size. So if you're a baby boomer, top left, if you're Gen X, millennials, I don't think we might have one Gen Z in the house, here's your job. No matter what generation you come from, if yours isn't up there, I apologize. Your job is to fill in as many of these blanks as you can. So if you're a baby boomer, I want you to try to fill out Gen Z. I want you to fill out the entire box, and you're allowed to work in teams. So in your pew, or in your little segment, you have 90 seconds. Figure it out. Ready, set, go. All right, let's try this together. And I think you're going to either love this or hate this. Regardless, I'm going to love it. So we're going to do it anyway. What we're going to do is we're going to go through each generation. If you feel like you know the answer, say it out loud with me. We're going to start with baby boomers. They would say, for calm down, they would say, don't flip your lid or wig. That was one that they would say. It was a gas. And then for gossip, what's the skinny? Okay, anyone 100% perfect? Tell me. Sure. Fair enough. Okay, but we're going blanket terms. And you're getting straight to my point. As soon as we get through this, we're going to be on the same exact page. Right. So if you stay with me, I promise we will get to the overarching theme here. So Gen X, they would say getting, as made famous by Will Smith, getting jiggy with it. Talk to the, take a chill pill. Anybody get all those right? Okay, good. Millennials would say the struggle is real. I can't. Sorry, not on fleek. And then Gen Z, this is probably your grandkids or your the kids in school right now. They would say for something fun, they would say it was lit. Girl, spill the. Let's get this bread and go off. But here's the thing. This is the point. All of these phrases, you could have put something else in every single one of these, but it meant the same thing. Now, so why is that important? If I'm a baby boomer from Metro Atlanta talking to a Gen Z kid from New York, we might have the same feelings on something, but say completely different words. So the way that we speak to each other and communicate with each other has to be more than just what the words are, but we have to find a way to listen closely enough to know what the meaning is. And that's what's really difficult. How often do you watch the news and it's someone that doesn't look like you, sound like you, talk like you, or they're not from where you're from and you disagree immediately? How many times does someone do that to you? Those are things that we've got to think about in education, but also in the world. And we're going to go very quickly through a very big chart. And I'm going to go through this in 60 seconds or less, so stay with me. This chart, which you can't see from where you are because it's too small for you to probably read all of this, has the different generations from the seniors, the greatest generation, all the way to what they're calling the coronials, the Generation Alpha. I know it's a horrible name, right? Thanks, social scientists. We're going to go through, and we've got all the different generations up here. The seniors, the greatest generation. We've got the builders, or also known as the silent generation, which came up through the Depression. We've got the baby boomers right after the Depression, and they're called baby boomers. Why? Because at the very end of World War II, 9 months later, maternity wards were full. And then we've got the baby busters. Why are they called the baby busters? Because that's when the birth control pill came out, and or when Roe v. Wade went through. Millennials, why are we called millennials? Because of the new millennium. You're welcome. Homelanders, or Gen Z, they're called that because the Department of Homeland Security was developed at the very beginning of their lifetime. And then coronials are called coronials because of the coronavirus. Okay, we'll stop there. So let's go through these life paradigms, and this is going to give all of us a better understanding of why these different generations might feel differently about certain things. Life paradigm. Seniors, manifest destiny. And some of you can probably remember your parents or your grandparents. At that point, we didn't have 50 states. We still had more to discover. Manifest destiny. The builders, be grateful you have a job. Because during their growing up and coming up, it was very rare for them to have that kind of financial security. Baby boomers, you decided you wanted better. And this is because there were so many of you, these really smart business people said, in 20 years, they're going to have jobs and spend money. How can I market to them? So you decided, you know what? I want better. They're going to cater to me. Baby busters, super skeptical generation. You had lying in the White House from the left and from the right. Watergate was during their coming up. A lot of that sounds kind of familiar. Anyway, millennials. My generation believes that life is a la carte. Why? I've never in my life bought a CD. Never had to. Why? Because I could go online and pick the song that I wanted. You probably had to buy an LP, and you had to listen to all the crap that came before the song that you actually liked, right? Does that resonate with you? That's a difference that happened in our generations. Gen Z, this is the kids in school right now. Their life paradigm is I'm coping and I'm hoping. And when I talk about this a lot with younger people especially, this makes them laugh and then immediately really upset. And we're going to talk a little bit about why their generation has that life paradigm in a second. And then coronials, we don't know. They don't talk yet. They're super small still, Generation Alpha. Let's talk a little bit about the attitude towards authority. Seniors, greatest generation, they revere the president because they sit in the office that is not a circle. No questions asked. Builders, I'm going to respect them. They're not super helping me out right now, but I respect my leaders because that's what I was taught to do. Baby boomers. I don't like this president. I'll replace him. There are more of us than there are of you. Busters. I'll just put up with it. If you're going to lie and cheat to get into the White House, Nixon, then I'll just wait for the next one. I'll endure it. Millennials. You notice in this last election cycle how many ads there were for candidates? It's because they know that millennials are going to go out there and choose their leaders. Gen Z. Some people would say that Generation Z is disrespectful to adults, rude to their parents and their grandparents, because they don't really need their leaders. Why is that sensation existing? It's because whenever you say something, they can get on their phone and fact check you like that. Different generation, right? It's different. And then colonials, I think that they're going to be questioning them. If you think about all the stuff that happened in the last 5 years, all of the people in charge have been making questionable decisions. I think we'd all agree with that. Let's go through the last thing, view of technology. Seniors, the greatest generation, wasn't a lot of technology going on at the turn of the century there, right? I think, what is technology? Fire? No. Okay, next, builders decided, you know what, I'm going to outlive it. I don't really, what were you talking about earlier, like the internet, AOL? Yeah, it's not going to last, is it? It's not going to be a thing. Guess what? It's a thing. Baby boomers decided to master it. That's why we have Microsoft. Bill Gates is a baby boomer. And then we've got all this technology because they mastered it. Busters decided, you know what? They're going to master it. I'm going to make some money off of it. Me, my generation, we enjoy technology. Snapchat was invented for people like me. Instagram for people like me. That's what it is. Homelanders, Gen Z, they want to hack it. How can I make this do what I want it to do, not what it's supposed to do? That's a problem. And I think that colonials are going to be using technology as a part of their human. Like they're going to have chips in their brains that, whatever. We don't need to get into that right now. But here's the thing that I really want to emphasize. Gen Z, the kids in school, coping and hoping. I want you to think about their lifetime real quick. The things that they're going through in school right now. And what we can do as a community to help them. Here's some things that they're going through right now. Did you know that their entire lifetime has been filled with the news coverage about war? Started with a terrorist attack. Their generation, every single year of their life, just about, there have been more mass shootings in a year than days in a year. And they get to read about that all the time. Here's another big difference. When you talk about this generation being more sensitive or weaker or whatever words you want to use, I want you to think about this. When you were a kid and you were getting bullied, you got on the bus after school and you went home. These kids get on the bus, they go home, they see on their device that they're still getting picked on every minute of the day. So before we judge these different generations, I think it's important to see the context of this. When I talk to kids, I talk to them about older generations and some of the struggles that they had. But I think it's important for us as we think about education, we think about the entire paradigm. This entire chart right here should define what we're doing to support those kids that need it. So when we talk about relevance of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, we've got to remember and know the true history of what's happened and be prepared to make tomorrow better than today was. And here's the last R that we're going to talk about together, and that's relationships. And we're going to wrap this up into a nice, beautiful little bow. But relationships is what Dr. Dickey, that principal, talked about with me about being the most important of the 3 R's. Here's a quick story. Does anyone remember where I started school? I started school right outside of London. I was born in Japan. I started school in London. I lived there for about 5.5 years. This is a really cute story. I was a really big British fan when I was a kid. My parents did not let me live on the military bases. We wanted to be embraced in the culture. So I was cute, I was a little bit shorter, had a really strong British accent. I did not know why your footballs were shaped the way that they were. I was very different as a small child. I moved to the United States when I was in 2nd grade, and I was super nervous, but super excited to go to school. This is not a joke. My first week of school here in the United States, I walked in, it was 2nd grade, I walked into class, and we were talking about the American Revolution. Now remember, I started school in the United Kingdom with British teachers in the British school system. And I very vividly remember my teacher saying, okay, who can tell me what you know about United States history? Who can tell me things about the start of America? And my teacher would call on Bobby. Bobby would say, I heard that George Washington had wooden teeth and he chopped down cherry trees. And my teacher would say, very good, Bobby. He also was a patriot. Anybody else? Oh, Sally, what do you think? I heard that Benjamin Franklin used to fly kites and they had keys on them and he discovered electricity. And she would say, oh, very good. Benjamin Franklin was a hero, a genius, and the mind of a generation. And she went through every single kid in that class. And then it got to Michael's turn. I raised my hand. I said, this is when my teaching career began. I made a very strong declaration that the American Revolution was no revolution, but instead an arrogant rebellion by some immature colonies. That was the first thing that I said in class publicly, and that earned me a fast pass to the principal's office. Yes, it did. So I tell that story, and usually when I tell that story, it gets a pretty good chuckle. I can imagine young Michael, cute British accent, declaring that for the world to know. And I've grown a lot since then, maybe not vertically as much, but I've grown in a lot of ways since then. I've learned a lot, and when it comes to relationships, I think about relationships with school and with learning and how important it is. I want to rephrase that story for you in just a slightly different way. Me and my family moved to the United States in 2002. My dad was stationed in England, and his next station was supposed to be in the Middle East. You remember what happened in 2001? So we didn't want to go to Bahrain. We decided we were going to come to the United States, where it was probably safer, a little bit calmer. I didn't want to go. I was a really big footballer then. Football, not football. A really big footballer then. I had a lot of great friends. I loved it there. I was really nervous to move somewhere across the world. I got to Cartersville, Georgia. I was the only kid that talks the way I did. I was the only kid that looked the way I did. But I thought the only place that I was going to be safe and secure was school. Just to find out that as soon as I said something, I got sent to the principal's office. Different story, right? Same exact plot, different resolve. So that taught me a lot of things that really shaped the way that I think about education. Here's some things that I learned. Here's something that I omitted from my story. I moved here old enough to be a first grader. I took a test smart enough to be a third grader. My dad said, you're too immature. That's where I got that word. You're too immature. How about second grade? And that's where I ended up. I learned that moment, that even though I was a smart kid, every student can learn. I learned that students have to feel safe to learn. For the next month, I did not listen to a word that teacher said, not because I didn't like them, not because I didn't respect them, but because I was honestly scared. I learned that students can't help what they bring into the classroom. I thought that what I knew was the truth. Honest. I've been reformed, by the way. I understand American history a lot better now than I did then. But at that point, I had no choice. How many kids walk into these schools and we say, I can't believe that they don't know blank. I can't believe they don't know how to blank. You think they chose that? Students can't help what they walk in with. Our job as adults and community members is to make sure they walk out of the door with more than they walked into it with. I also learned that adults can learn too. That teacher learned a brand new version of American history that day, but she also learned how to deal with kids that were different than her. We all have chances to grow, and I think that's important. So here are the relationships that I want to share with you that I think are important. Relationships in our schools. Take a look at these bullets. Every student deserves attention, a chance to feel safe, and the belief that they can learn. Anybody disagree? Okay, good. It makes me nervous. I think it's important that we remember that every single student deserves those basic rights. And I also want to extend this, that every educator deserves it too. That's something that has been missing a lot in the last few years. And I think you would agree. During COVID, teachers were heroes, and instantly, villains. How? I don't know. I didn't choose that. But I think it's important that we as community members understand that our teachers deserve this as well. We deserve that as well. I think relationships in our communities, and that's where you come in. These are some of the people in my community that make a huge difference, that allow me to make sure my kids have a life-changing experience. How often are you getting into your schools? How often are you talking to the people in your schools? How often are you listening about what's going on in schools? Relationships with the community is really, really important. That old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Anybody agree with that? It takes a village to raise a child? I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't live in your community. I don't know what it's like. I know a lot of communities, the village is imploding. The village is attacking from within. And there's only one victim when that happens: kids. So we've got to find a way with some of this divisive conversations that go on, the politics that don't need to be in education. I think we've got to find a way to make sure that what we talked about today in your sermon, we got to make sure that we're on the same page to make sure that every kid has a good experience. Anyone know the name David Issei? Anyone listen to NPR? Anybody know what StoryCorps is? Okay, so I had a chance to meet the founder of StoryCorps a couple of days ago, and he talked about one quote that really resonated. It said, "It's really hard to hate somebody when you've heard them tell a story. It's really hard to hate somebody when you're talking about what they feed their kids for breakfast." Right? Those conversations are really important. How often are we having conversations, telling stories that build communities, not break them apart? I think that's really, really important. I think relationships with our officials is really important. You probably recognize some of the people in these pictures. Like that's your governor and your first lady. That's Matthew Gamble. Anybody know who this is? Sonny Perdue. He was the governor of the state of Georgia. Anybody know who that is? That's James McConville. He's the chief of staff for the United States Army. He's a 3-star general. And we had a conversation a few months ago about how can education and the military work together to make things better. And I'll tell you, James McConville was very receptive to the idea that the military is changing, the world is changing. I guess we should too. Did you know that on the ASVAB, kids still have to do it without a calculator? And the question was, why aren't there more kids that are qualified to be in the military? It went from 2/3 of kids taking the ASVAB would pass the test and be qualified to be in the military to now only 30% of kids are qualified to serve in the armed forces right now. I said, well, what's the test look like? Well, we still don't let them use calculators. Oh, okay, let's rethink this. In what situation do you not have a calculator present? And now I know, in the military, there are many of them. But I think it's important that we give kids a chance to continue to develop. If General McConville is willing to think about these things, I think it's important for all of us to think about how we advocate to our officials about things that are important. I think relationship with the work that we're doing is important. This picture is kind of cool to me. Quick story. Anybody in band when you were in school? Any band people? A couple of you? Yeah, band nerds unite. This picture was taken on a hot day in August. You notice that this is a marching band. We're on asphalt in this picture. The sun had just set, and the asphalt was registering at about 115 degrees. Kids had been on that asphalt for hours, and they're about to pass out. They were squirmish, and we were about to be done with rehearsal, and a kid said, "Mr. Kobito, look up." I said, "What?" I was a little bit snippy with him. I said, "What?" He said, "It's a W for Woodland." It was one of the cutest things. It made me remember why we do things, because kids deserve a chance to have a great education. We've got to push them, but we've got to appreciate the things that happen in the job too. And the last thing I'll tell you about relationships right now is relationships with the world. I think it's really important for our kids to get to see the world around them. For example, this is our kids in New York City for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. These are some of our kids in London. I've taken my kids all around the world, and I very vividly remember a kid named Swayze. She came up to me after we were done our New York trip, and she said, "Mr. Kobito, I've never felt like I belonged until I came off the bus, looked up, and saw these big buildings. This is where I'm supposed to be." She went from being a kid that was not going to finish high school to making it, and she's studying in New York. So I think showing our kids the world and showing them where they could exist in the world is really important for what we do in school too. So relationships, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I think the things that we did yesterday, it takes a village. That quote, that's an African proverb that's hundreds of years old. I think if we want tomorrow to be better than today, we've got to remember that particular tenet as well. So with that, reading, writing, and arithmetic, are they important? You better believe it. But what's more important? A truly rigorous education for kids that's exhaustive, encompassing, thorough, and accurate. What's more important for kids? Things that are relevant to them. We have to stop teaching kids things that we were taught because we were taught it, and start teaching kids things that they need to know because they deserve to know it. And I think the relationships piece is really important. The more that kids exist here, and let's be honest, adults exist here, the harder it is for us to form real meaningful relationships. Tell people stories. Talk about what you're feeding your grandkids for breakfast. Have those conversations, and I think the world's going to be a better place. That's me. I hope that's helpful. Thank you for the time today. If anyone have any questions or thoughts about education right now? Yeah, what you got? That's a great question. Now, I'll try to boil this into a 30-second thing. You ready? Okay, so every single school in the state of Georgia picks a teacher of the year for their school. Then they submit all of those names to the county or school, city system to pick a system-wide teacher of the year. And then we write 6 essays. We get 3 letters of recommendation, 1 from a kid, 1 from a teacher, 1 from a community member, and then a principal's optional one. We submit all that to the state. They pick 10 of us. The 10 of us go to the state, and we do a full day of interviews. I did a 45-minute interview with a panel of about 14 people. I gave a motivational speech, and then they picked me. I don't know why. So it's a very long process, but here we are. That's how they pick it. Good question. Interesting. Sure. Wow. That's pretty amazing. Right. That promotes deeper learning for kids. Sure. I think that's huge. I thank you for bringing that up because it brings up a lot of different things. I think in school for the last maybe 15 years, there's been such an emphasis on standardized testing, which is all about your ability to pick something, where we're starting to see a shift towards what I call it deeper learning or critical thinking or problem solving, where kids are allowed the opportunity to create on their own, build on their own. Because honestly, like, who does not like learning? We all like to learn. It's when people stop allowing us to learn that we stop learning. So I think that's a great example of that. And another thing that I think is worth mentioning, anybody know the name Chris Clark? He's the chairman of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. There's a statistic that's going out right now that's going to be really staggering to you. In 2030, for Georgia to remain economically viable, we need 65% of the population that's working to have more than a high school diploma. It's a crazy statistic. Right now, we're sitting at like 27%. But here's the thing. That does not mean that every kid has to go to college to be successful. And I think that's a push that's really important. What he means...
Or what's required for any particular job. When my brother was done with high school, he was qualified to be a chemist.
Sure.
By the time he came back from Vietnam, he needed associate's degree.
Right.
By the time I was done and was in associate's degree, bachelor's degree. And now you almost need a master's degree.
Right, and there are a lot of fields that have that type of standardization of credibility, but there are a lot of professions. I got a kid that in one of those pictures, his name is Wade. He was in welding as a high school kid. Took welding classes, got a post-secondary certificate in welding. He was 17 when he graduated. Came back to a football game the next year as an 18-year-old driving a BMW because he was making 6 figures as a welder. So that does not mean that you've got to go become a chemist and get a master's degree or a pediatrician or a social worker or whatever it is that you do to get those degrees. But
Your point about how many people are going to need a degree
yes,
for society, it's because the standards, and on part, it's because the standards.
sure. Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways probably for the better to make sure that there's some standardization of what people are able to do, but there are a lot of different outlets for people to get a great education and be contributors to society, which is really what we need. Hey. Yes. Hey now, easy. She's talking to me.
better than start from. Community. And so now they're going back. So we have to look at why that was really out there. And one of the questions I want to ask you is about this attack. We have to understand African American history is a diverse, not black, but we did create it. What is this attack? But we didn't do that. But they don't want to talk. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to hurt somebody's feelings, because it hurts my feelings. Like, we got antebellum homes here, where me and my mother were working as maids, and where I sat on the board for one of them to become a home. And I feel very comfortable with that.
Sure.
But then I have friends across the county. They'll put to represent a hardship that they
Sure.
feel is part of what their ancestors. So we've been living with this hardship all our lives. But now that it hurts somebody else, what do you think about that?
That's a really heavy question. And I'm just to be between us girls, I'm not going to give you all of the true answers because there is this on my tie right here. So I want to make sure that but I will say this though, I think it's important for us to be able to process things the way that we need to. And I think it's important for us to be able to process real things, true things. And that's as vague, but hopefully answers your question. I don't want to get into the weeds of that because I think that's a longer conversation than we have time for, and it's also politically pretty, it's landmine central with a conversation like that, but I do think it's an important conversation. If that's something you feel really passionate about, you need to keep doing the work that you're doing on it. But in terms of education, I think every kid deserves a chance to learn, process the truth, and have a better tomorrow than they had yesterday. And I think that as we look at today, for a kid like me, I don't think 100 years ago I could have been the Georgia Teacher of the Year. So I'm thankful. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. Wow. Yes, and I think that there are two things that I'll say about that. One, that goes exactly back to my point on we need to teach kids, not train kids. If I was trained to do something, when the system changes, I am not able to keep up. But if I was taught how to learn, there's nothing that can stop me. And I think that's a really important point. And you got to think about as we promote these things, or we don't like certain things that are happening in advancement, you need to think about those people that had to retire because they couldn't do certain things. And it's nothing against that decision that that person made because it was something that made them feel the most comfortable. But I think when I think about my kids, I want them to be able to continue to learn until it's over. And I think that's really important. I think another thing that's really interesting, when I was at Google, I'll flex on that because Google headquarters, beautiful place, by the way. Check it out. Has anyone heard anything about this Chat GPT thing? Yes. So this whole artificial intelligence thing, I just got my master's degree last year, and I put in a couple of the prompts that I had for, I need a 15-page research paper with this many citations. I asked ChatGPT to do it. It did it in 30 seconds, and I read it, and it was better than what I wrote, and that took me months. So there are a lot of people that are like, that's going to be the thing that destroys education. How many times have we heard that? Paper's going to be the thing that destroys education. Remember 1815? But I think one of the things that the Google guys, one of them said this. He said, ChatGPT is not going to ruin the world or take anyone's jobs. The people that can figure out how to use it, they're going to take everyone's jobs. So I think keeping up with that technology and being on the front edge of that wave, that's the only way you don't get swallowed in by the riptide. Hey.
So I'm going to help answer the question that I'm going to ask you. To your question, I think when Mr. Kobito quality teachers across the state, not just in places where they build massive
I see that. That was very pointed. There are a lot of things going on, and I'll throw a word of caution and then give some ideas. Some of you saw that Bernie Sanders just put on a bill to make the minimum pay $60,000 for teachers. And there's a lot of promise behind that bill, but I do think there's some language in there that's important to note. If you don't fund that through your system, then that makes you disqualified for Title I funding. So there are a lot of loopholes in there that makes it a little bit precarious for that particular national policy opportunity there. But here's some things that are locally happening. The Department of Education is working on making sure that Brian Kemp's latest promise of a pay raise for all teachers is fully funded from the state, not responsible. I'm not sure if you knew this. Half of the things that are paid for in school systems is paid for by the school system. It's not the state itself. Federal pays 1% of salary, state pays 49% approximately, and then local school systems pay the rest. So when some of these things come out, the gold dome can say, hey, here's $5,000. And all these school systems are saying, how am I supposed to come up with $2,500 for every single teacher in my system? So that's something that they're trying to work on. So this last pay raise that just got announced from Governor Kemp is from the gold dome for every single school system to figure out. There's a lot of work right now being done on the QBE formula to better fund all of those particular opportunities. The Department of Education is working on professional learning opportunities that will be more attractive to teachers so they don't get drawn or pushed out of the profession, and that's really helpful. We're also working on a pilot platform for the best places to teach. It's going to be something that when you're looking on the DOE website, you can look at, I really want to go to a place that's a little bit more, I have land. I can look in my backyard and see trees, not my neighbor's, window. Where's a good place like that? Oh, here. Oh, I want to go to a place that's close to Chattanooga, close to Atlanta, but not right in the heart of it. Huh. So there will be different factors that you can actually look at to see what things are like. Oh, I want to go to a place where the cost of living is super high. Okay, go to Midtown or Buckhead. Cool. I want to go to a place where the cost of living isn't quite so high. I want to go to a place where the population of the community is blank. So there's a pilot program just for best places to teach that's going to give teachers an opportunity to kind of look around. The truth of the matter is, and you're not going to like this, a lot of these younger generations are the a la carte generation. I want something different. I want to change a scenery. I want something that's not what I grew up in. But you'll find they want something pretty similar. So you might find somebody that's from south of Atlanta, the same exact distance as where we are right now, saying, I want to go to a place that's kind of like where I grew up, but not. Best places to teach in Georgia? Oh. And that's going to be a way, I think, that we can help with recruiting. The other thing is making sure that as a community there's enough housing for teachers that's affordable. I don't know what the housing situation is in this part of the state, but making sure there's housing for people that want to move in so they can. And the most prominent, effective thing for us to do in this particular school system and county is have grow your own programs. Have opportunities for kids to learn about what teaching is like when they're in school. What is it like? Can I do an early childhood education program? Can I learn what the impact could be? Oh, great. Is there a way that I can have a joint with my school system that's also joined with a college around here that will give me a scholarship to go and learn to be a teacher? That's happening all over the country, and a lot of people don't know about that. There are a lot of school systems that, there are some right outside of Savannah. If you say, I'm going to be a teacher in the school system for 5 years after I graduate from college, you don't have to pay for college. That was easy. I mean, it's not as easy as that, but those particular opportunities are worth exploring. And if you're worried about that, go talk to your school board. Make sure that they know that they're not going to be reinventing a wheel. They're just going to be taking it off of somebody else's car and putting it on their own. So I think that's going to be the thing that makes the most substantial change in an area like this or even in Bartow County. Those programs, like I was doing a new teacher orientation in Bartow County. 3 of the kids in that room, I taught them. And I'm not that old. So the fact that these people were already coming through because they went through those early childhood education programs, proof's in the pudding. Does that help? Okay. Yes. Okay. Interesting.
But in Atlanta, we also have to look at that New York County.
Sure.
They have more than two high schools, one for the north and the south. But in Atlanta, our rates, right in my neighborhood, that community school in my neighborhood, across the communities are.
Yeah, it's more dense population.
So they get that, so you kind of have to look at the density of the population.
I think we would, as a principal, every educator would agree that bigger is not always better. We are always fighting for our classes to be smaller, unless you're a band director, then you want, like I want to have a bunch of kids in my band, but every teacher, like we're talking about, we need to hire teachers because classrooms are too full. Like we got 35 kids in the class and it should be 20. We're talking about counselors right now. The state or the national recommendation for counselor to student ratio is 250 to 1. Georgia is right now 490 to 1. Unbelievable. So I don't think anyone's arguing that bigger is better. I would maybe say that the policy that might be encouraging that particular talk is for schools to be rebuilt and have capital outlay funds from the state. It has to have a building with a certain population in comparison to what is allowed in that school. So if you have 3 schools that have 500 kids each, but the population of that school could hold 2,000, they'll never get funds. But if you have a school that's got 1,500 and the population should be 2,000 and it's a really old school, they might be able to get money. That's the only thing I can think of policy-wise. But most things are fiscal things, unfortunately. Oh, totally. I think the question comes from where does that money come from? Right? I'll add that to my list of things. Because I've not really thought about that in that particular. I've thought about the vouchers, I've thought about the charter schools, but I didn't know about this situation specifically. So thank you for bringing that up. Yes. Yeah. And I'll give you my final thought in relation to that with something that the Department of Education is doing policy-wise right now. Right now, the school system pay scale stops at 20 years of teaching. So if you're getting paid by the state of Georgia from 21 until you retire, you don't get a pay raise unless your school system foots that bill. And that is something that the Department of Education and the Capitol is working on right now to make sure that you get paid all the way through your 35 is what the hope is. So that is something that, yeah, you're right. If I have a big football team, then I guess our school's good. And I think teachers deserve to get paid because they're teachers.
In the African American community in Walker County, our biggest concern and our biggest concern you can go from kindergarten to 12th grade and never see a
Yes.
and it affects the children negatively and felt until that the teachers handle the children. And that's the big thing we've been on the past couple of years, is getting more color in the schools and at higher positions. We feel that's extremely negative.
Sure.
Well, I want to thank Michael for being here and spending past time. Michael, I will tell you, there are many, many reasons that I am Presbyterian, not simply because I spent most of my years growing up as one. The biggest reason, though, is at the end of sermons, there is never a question and answer. We have to we're not changing, by the way, just so you know.
Well, I did float the idea to you. You said that's a good idea.
Yeah, you go for it. I'll watch and see what happens. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time. We are often said we are small in number but mighty in spirit, and I hope you will see we have
Yes.
people who are passionate about their community,
Totally.
and especially about our children.
Yes.
So thank you for being here and giving us your time, and your wife coming and giving us her time is the only way she gets to see you. They catch each other right now in the car. That being said, I'd like to ask Wilson, because this is what I do when he's on the spot, is to close us in a word of prayer. This is a church meeting, by the way. And afterwards, I really want you to go downstairs and eat at least 12 cookies of tea. If you eat it on church property, there are no calories. I think that's somewhere in the book of Noah. So